Hello, my name is Nick Ritter, and today I'll be talking about the post-Gaddafi crisis in Libya. Our focus question is, how can the international community solve the humanitarian crisis in Libya? So, a little background on Libya, the fall of Gaddafi. So, in 1969, Muammar Gaddafi rose to power through a coup d'etat where he took political control of Libya. Since then, in 2011, with the help of NATO, the Libyan citizens helped topple Gaddafi's regime, and they also killed Gaddafi. And in turn, this created a power vacuum, and now there are three major factions contending for political power, among a few other smaller militias. And what this has done is created widespread human rights issues and economic failure due to the political instability this has caused. So to talk about the humanitarian crisis and human rights issues, there are several ways that human rights have been violated in Libya. For example, all three factions involved have indiscriminately attacked civilians. Migrants and refugees experience torture, exploitation, and sexual abuse during their travel to European countries. Freedom of speech is corroded because journalists, human rights activists, and NGO workers have been abducted and killed. And in addition, women's rights are violated because activists are harassed by different militias, and it's extremely dangerous for women to travel alone in Libya. Libya also faces a crippled economy because of this political instability. For example, let's focus on oil production. So Libya's economy relies on the balance of commodity and food imports and oil exports. However, due to political strife, the amount of oil that Libya can produce has been greatly reduced as militias blockade and destroy oil. This has led to 3 consecutive recessions between 2013 and 2015. Secondly, trade balance and public spending. So in 2013, the trade balance shifted to a trade deficit, and oil receipts have fallen to less than 15% of their 2012 level, while consumption expenditures have remained high. Libya finances these imports through massive public spending, and the country uses net foreign reserves to maintain commodity imports. And lastly, the rule of law. While Libyans have property rights and can start businesses, these rights are not upheld in practice, and warring militias have seized and confiscated businesses and homes in Benghazi. So without the protection of property rights, people have little incentive to form their own businesses or to augment the private sector in Libya. And the root of these humanitarian problems and these economic problems are the political instability caused by the major political actors. So our major political actors, we have the General National Congress, which was formed in 2012. We have the House of Representatives, which was formed in 2014. And in 2016, the UN announced their support for a new government, the government of national accord. And the problem here is that none of these three authorities recognize each other's power. So people have different allegiances to different powers, and those allegiances have caused this civil war in 2014. In addition, there's other forces involved here. The Islamic State, there's ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Ansar al-Sharia in Libya, and they've attacked pretty much every city in Libya. So other countries surrounding Libya, such as Egypt, United Arab Emirates, Turkey, and Qatar, they've helped provide arms to Libya to combat terrorism. So we have short-term and long-term recommendations here. So our short-term recommendations, we suggest that surrounding countries and organizations help establish a regional peacekeeping mission and humanitarian intervention backed by the international community, where troops can forcibly protect civilians, secure routes to distribute food, healthcare, and necessary provisions the government cannot provide. Looking at this from a tri-dimensional standpoint, our intent is to protect civilians caught in the crossfire between the different factions that are at civil war, and to distribute fundamental aid to Libyans. And this is ethical because Libya is a failed state and they cannot protect their own citizens or provide for their own citizens, so the international community must do this for them. And in terms of the means, while the means of military intervention violate the Westphalian order and norm of sovereignty, the presence of a peacekeeping force is ethical if their actions are in the interest of the people and community of Libya. Furthermore, if the good that comes from protecting citizens and distributing humanitarian aid outweigh the potential harm caused by a military intervention, our outcome is ethical, justifying our entire course of action. We also have we have 2 long-term solutions. So our first long-term solution is that the United Nations can establish parliamentary elections and enforce power sharing among factions. By giving representation to all competing factions, citizens can effectively determine their own statehood and exercise self-determination. The ability of citizens to self-determine gives the new parliament a measure of domestic legitimacy and will reinforce its ability to control citizens and provide protection, healthcare, and other public goods. And this will lead to recognition from other states and sovereignty. And again, looking at this from a tri-dimensional perspective, our intent to reestablish political stability is ethical because once this is established, then the government will be able to protect citizens and increase the welfare of citizens. Our means of creating order by establishing parliamentary elections is ethical if all factions involved support a democratic system and voluntarily want to take part and self-determine their own statehood. Furthermore, if the elections create a degree of voluntary self-determination and domestic legitimacy, allowing the government to enforce order, then the outcome and our recommendations are justified. And then we have our second long-term recommendation, and that would have UN forces back the government of national accord, the government that they recognize, by providing intelligence, weapons, troops, and air support, things like that. Our intent is still ethical because if you support a government and it becomes legitimate, then it can control its borders and police its people, provide public goods and services. However, with the potential outcome, while you're establishing one government, it'll come at the expense of hundreds more casualties at the hands of the UN. So our outcome is definitely not ethical, and our means of doing this military force is not ethical, as it violates the norm of non-intervention. So in summary, the fall of Gaddafi in 2011 created widespread human rights issues and economic failure, which was caused by the political instability between the warring factions. And we plan to solve this by creating solutions for temporary relief and protection, and also for long-term peace and stability. Do you have any questions?